Okay, so here we are again. We have the chance to share the Dharma for some more time together. So it's very precious time that we have. And like I was saying yesterday, the fact that we just have the interest in the Dharma, and not only the interest, but we have the external conditions so that we can hear the teachings and discuss them and meditate on them. Having internal and external conditions, they're not so easy to come by. Yeah. There's probably a lot of people who said, oh, I want to listen to that course, and then never quite made it to sign up, or they signed up and something else came up that seemed more important or more interesting. So for all of you people who had that interest and then signed up and made it here, then that's really fantastic. Yeah. Okay, so let's spend a couple of minutes letting our mind settle down, just watching the breath, and then we will set our motivation like we did yesterday. We'll have a talk, and then we'll have some questions and maybe answers at the end. Okay, so lower your eyes. Let your breathing be natural. Don't force it in any way. And become aware of the flow of your breath as it goes in, as it goes out. You can focus either at your belly and watch the rise and fall of your belly, or at the nostrils and observe the sensation of the air as it passes there. So try and keep your mind at one of the places. And if you get distracted, then notice it, bring your attention back. And let's cultivate our motivation. So I think what really brings something very special to a teaching is when everybody who is participating, teachers, students, and so on, share the same motivation. When we're all here for the same reason, when we all want to grow in the same way. And so I think all of us here admire the Bodhisattva vehicle, admire the qualities of the Bodhisattvas. And even though we may not have actual bodhicitta right now, there's an aspiration to develop it and a admiration for bodhicitta and for those people who have uncontrived bodhicitta. So take a minute and renew that aspiration inside yourself. And then in that way, we're all aligned, going in the same direction. All of us wanting to be free from samsara. All of us wanting to develop the love and compassion that bodhisattvas have that is spread equally and constantly to all living beings. And all of us aspire for the highest awakening, to be able to benefit all those sentient beings most effectively. So let's together generate that motivation. And then slowly open your eyes and come out of your meditation. So, in case some of you probably weren't here when I was teaching at the Abbey last night, so we covered there, starting on, I just want to review it for a minute. The section just before the one where we're going to start today. And that section was called Examining True Dukkha via 10 points. And so this was taken from Shravaka Bhumi by Asanga. So I'll just go through the 10 very quickly because they're a very good way of really putting together the major points to look at when we think about true dukkha, the first of the four truths. Okay, so the first is to understand the impermanence of change, and that is course change. Yeah, when volcanoes explode or a building falls down, someone dies, the change that we can encounter with our senses. The second is the impermanence of perishability. And this is the fact that there's nothing that can stop things from changing on a momentary basis. Yeah, everything is constantly changing from one nanosecond to the next. There's no way to stop that. So things are continuously perishing. The third is the impermanence of separation. And this is remembering on a personal level that everything we are or have or who we're related to, all of this we will separate from. Yeah, that whatever comes together is in the process of separating. Okay, and there's no way to stop that. The fourth of the 10 points is the impermanence of the Dharmata, which means that the nature of conditioned phenomena is that they are momentary. This is just their nature. Nothing is added or needs to be done to make them change. The fifth is the impermanence of the present. And that is looking at how in this very moment what exists is in the process of disintegrating and vanishing. Okay, and that we can never really find the present moment or isolate the present moment to make it something that we can hang on to. So that was the fifth. Then the sixth is the dukkha of pain that we talked about yesterday. The seventh is the dukkha of change that we also talked about. And the eighth is the pervasive dukkha of conditioning. So those three we covered yesterday together. Then the ninth is the aspect of unobservability. And what this means, this is getting into emptiness, that we're unable to observe any kind of self that exists separate from our mental and physical aggregates. There's no self that's over and above, kind of standing back while our body and mind is doing something or experiencing something. So there's no separate self or I like that. And then 10 is that there's no I that is in control of the body and mind. Okay. So for those of us who are control freaks, who want to control everybody else, this is an opportunity to see that we can't even control our own body and mind. So trying to control other people is really useless. Okay. And that we should try and instead practice the Dharma so that our own body and mind will go in a virtuous direction. Okay, so those are the 10 points from Asanga. I just went through them briefly, because they fill out, this, what we're trying to understand to generate renunciation, to aspire for liberation, because we want to be free of these conditions in which, everything's changing, we're separated from what we like, we can't get what we want, we get instead what we don't like, and so on. Okay, so now we're on page 57. So this is starting afresh. And this section is called Our Human Value. So reflecting on the above descriptions of true dukkha, by applying them to our own lives and by observing the experiences of others, is crucial for making this teaching come alive. Okay, so this point we should write down and look at every time before we sit and do a meditation session. Okay, because the real key to the Dharma coming alive is when we apply it to our own life and when we see what happens to us and what happens to the people around us and what happens in the world. When we see and understand all these things in the light of what the Buddha taught, that makes the Dharma come alive, because then we can validate the truth of what the Buddha said, because we can see it in our own lives and in the lives of other people. If we don't do this, we may meditate on the points, in order, but it's just intellectual, and we don't really take it in as something that is happening to me right this very minute. Okay, so then our practice, after a while, it begins to feel kind of dry and intellectual. So it's really important, to apply all these things and understand our own experience through them. So by doing this, a sincere aspiration to be free from samsara and attain liberation or awakening will arise in our minds. Because to aspire for liberation or awakening, we have to want to change. We have to want to get out of samsara, And if we don't understand our own experience as samsara, and instead just think, oh, samsara, yes, there are the 3 kinds of dukkha, and there's 6 disadvantages, and the 8 bad conditions, and they exist somehow out there. if we look at the Dharma like that, then we're not going to aspire to change anything. It's really important that we really apply everything to our lives. So then when we're able to generate those aspirations, they become the fuel for our Dharma practice. And as our understanding of Dukkha gradually increases, so will our faith in the three jewels as qualified spiritual guides. Okay, so how do we generate faith in the three jewels? We think about the teachings, and when we have a feeling of that, how true the teachings are, then we know, wow, the Buddha really knew what he was talking about. He wasn't just going blah, blah, making something up. He knew what he was talking about. So this increases our faith. So slowly we awaken to the fact that money, social status, popularity, power, praise, and appreciation, while may be useful in this life, do not bring lasting happiness and instead bring more worries and difficulties. So this we can see in our life, if we don't have money, that's a problem. But if you have a lot of money, that's also a problem. Okay? If you have a lot of money, then there's people who want you to loan it to them. Then there's scams. Then, there's all sorts of things. Popularity may be nice. A lot of people think having a good reputation be nice. But then, we have to experience everybody's unrealistic expectations for us. And that's really a drag when you can't be yourself because all these people expect you to, be quite different. Yeah. So these worldly things, they seem desirable, but again, they don't really bring lasting happiness. And instead they can bring a whole, bundle of problems with them. Okay, we begin to see that chasing these things bring more worries and difficulties. So I often use the example of computer hell, because this is a hell realm that I visit not infrequently. Okay, and as soon as you have a computer, you are going to become a denizen of computer hell. Yeah? The computer's supposed to make your life easier, but it always seems to have a knack for breaking either when you're doing something really important or you're in a hurry. Doesn't it? Yeah? So it's like every possession that we think will make our life easier, it brings its own set of problems. Mm-hmm. So we begin to see that chasing these things is like riding a roller coaster or a merry-go-round. It may temporarily seem thrilling, but at the end, we're back where we started. So true, isn't it? When you're a little kid and you get on a Ferris wheel, yeah, and you think, whoa, I'm going so high. And then you always go back to where you were before. And the same on the merry-go-round. Okay. So same with a roller coaster, except by that time you're happy to get out of the car. Yeah. So enduring peace still eludes us. And deep inside, we still lack a stable sense of self-worth. No matter how much luxury surrounds us, how exciting our jobs are, how famous we are, or how many people love us, we still are not beyond aging, sickness, and death. True, isn't it? It doesn't matter what your social status, wealth, reputation is. We all go through aging, sickness, and death. In response to this predicament, in their confusion, some people self-medicate with any number of addictions. Okay, so when we are living our life chasing after worldly happiness, but none of it really brings some lasting security or a pleasure or predictability, then we fall into depression, despair, and then we tend to turn to our old habitual ways of dealing with negative feelings. Okay? So, how do we deal with them? Well, some people use drugs. Some people use alcohol. Some people become workaholics. They work so hard so they don't have to really look at their life. We use sex as a way to exit and get some pleasure. Digital games, my goodness. Yeah, how not to think about your life, just go gaming on the internet. Watch TV, gambling. And then the all-time high, shopping. What do we do when there's a sense of malaise and boredom and things aren't right? We go shopping. And it doesn't matter what we buy, just the sense of procuring, another head of lettuce. It's like this brings us some relief from our pain. Okay, but those things serve only as short-time distractions that in the end leave us back where we started from. Okay, so other people think that life is meaningless and they consider ending their lives, which from a Buddhist viewpoint is really tragic because it took us so many previous lifetimes of creating virtue to create the cause for the opportunity that we have now, that to suicide is just like throwing away all the effort we put in previous lives. And we're giving up, such a remarkable situation. So ending our lives is very foolish because we all have great potential. We have the potential to become fully awakened Buddhists and the potential to experience reliable joy and fulfillment. I do prison work, and one of the incarcerated men that I was writing to, he told me at some point that he was considering suicide. But then when he became a Buddhist, he realized that he would only get reborn and that suicide didn't solve anything. And so he decided to stay alive. And that was a very good choice. What has happened to him since is in his prison, he has started a intramural TV station so that the other inmates can have some educational programs. He's a trans person, so he's advocating for trans people in the prison system and outside. So he's really, turned his life around and feels that is quite meaningful now. So I was very happy about that. When we analyze how suffering and happiness arise in our minds, we see that they come about from our actions. And our actions are motivated by our disturbing emotions and distorted views. Okay, so verbal and physical actions, things we do when we communicate and things we do physically, these all have before them a mental action, a motivation, an intention. So the body and speech don't move, they don't create actions unless there's an intention. And even for the mental actions of planning something over time, the mind has to move with an intention. Okay. So first we have the afflictions and the intentions that go with them. And those produce actions or karma. And then the karma ripens in terms of our experiences. Without even considering past lives, we can see that the more subdued our minds are, the more peaceful and happy we are. That's true, isn't it? Yeah. If our external environment is tumultuous, with inner mental peace, we can transform external difficulties into the path to awakening by practicing the mind training teachings. Yeah? So if we have the ability to subdue the afflictions in our mind and turn our mind to a realistic and beneficial way of looking at things, then it doesn't matter who we're with or what circumstances we're in. We can find a way to be peaceful and to appreciate the situation we're in. Yeah. When our mind, when our afflictions are uncontrolled, then even if we're in a wonderful environment with kind people and good food and everything we like, we can still be very miserable. Have you ever experienced that? Been in a beautiful place, or on vacation somewhere, and it's really lovely, and you have good food and good friends, but you're totally miserable inside. Yeah. This is when the afflictions run the show. Mm-hmm. When we're able to subdue those afflictions, then we can experience satisfaction and contentment, regardless of where we're at. We will find some way to make the situation meaningful for us. But when our minds are upset, agitated, or obscured, we are miserable even when the external environment is fantastic. This clearly shows that happiness and suffering are related to our mental attitudes. Therefore, training our minds is worthwhile. So by reflecting on dukkha in this way, we become less infatuated with samsara and turn our natural aspiration for well-being to nirvana. So Gyatso Tongme Zampo's poem, The 37 Practices of Bodhisattvas, some of you may be familiar with it. It's a wonderful poem. So verse 9 of that poem sums this up. And he says, like dew on the tip of a blade of grass, pleasures of the three worlds last only a while and then vanish. Aspire to the never-changing supreme state of liberation. This is the practice of bodhisattvas. Yeah. So don't stay on the merry-go-round. Don't try and, keep trying to get oil from sand. Change your aspiration to one that is actually going to be worthwhile for liberation and full awakening. And then in describing his own spiritual journey before attaining awakening, here's a quote from one of the Pali Suttas. It's a little bit long passage, but it's really incredible. So this is what the Buddha says. Before my awakening, while I was still only an unawakened bodhisattva, I too, being myself subject to birth, sought what was also subject to birth. Being myself subject to aging, sickness, death, sorrow, and defilement, I sought what was also subject to aging, sickness, death, sorrow, and a defilement. Meaning that, what did he turn to for refuge? Other samsaric people that were just like him, that didn't know the value of human life or how to transform their minds to the usual distractions. So then he continued, then I considered thus, why, being myself subject to birth, do I seek what is also subject to birth? Why, being myself subject to aging, sickness, death, sorrow, and defilement, do I seek what is also subject to aging, sickness, death, sorrow, and defilement? Suppose I seek the unborn supreme security from bondage, nirvana. Suppose I seek the unaging, unailing, deathless, sorrowless, and undefiled supreme security from bondage, nirvana. So he's relating his own experience, how he was just like us, grabbing on to external things for happiness, seeking refuge in what was also under the influence of birth, aging, sickness, death, sorrow, lamentation, and so forth. But then he decided to change his aspiration and directed toward the peace of nirvana, towards the having an incredible, meaningful life by attaining full awakening of Buddhahood. So while subject to the unsatisfactory circumstances of samsara, we ignorant beings take refuge in people and things that are also subject to the vagaries of samsara. Yeah? We're subject to aging, sickness, and death. So what do? We become best friends with other people who are subject to aging, sickness, and death. And, those people can't show us the way out of samsara. And someday we will be separated from them too. But what if we were to turn to the three jewels for refuge and seek nirvana instead? Practitioners with this aspiration are not distracted by the appeal of samsara's pleasures, riches, power, and fame, and they easily stay focused on their spiritual aims. This leads to mental peace in this life, as well as to liberation. Bodhisattvas expand on this aspiration for freedom to include all sentient beings, and they generate bodhicitta, the aspiration for full awakening. So this point becomes very vivid when you think of the people that you envy, the people who have what you wish you had, the people who have it all, who don't have your problems. They're rich, they're famous, they're popular, they're well respected in samsara, and we look at those people and we think, oh, they must have such wonderful lives. But then if you ever meet any of them and talk to them for more than 5 minutes, what you start hearing is their problems. One problem after another problem after another problem. Okay. And so, in each of our countries, we have some very wealthy people. But when you read about the lives of some of these wealthy people, I don't know, I would not trade my life for theirs because they have a lot of misery. Okay. To me, if I think of the previous US president, I call him Donnie. If you think of Donnie, rich, famous, well, supposedly rich, we don't really know, famous, powerful, but what a miserable person he is. Yeah. What does he tweet about? He's always angry in his tweets. His tweets are all about gaining revenge for the people who don't agree with him. Okay. Incredibly unhappy person. Yeah. So it's just a very good example that you may have all these things, but that is not what is going to make us happy. So lessening our attachment to samsaric pleasures does not mean having aversion towards our bodies, relationships, good food, praise, reputation, and other sense objects. These things in and of themselves are neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. Okay? So having money or success or whatever, these things, they are just situations or objects. In and of themselves, they're not virtuous. They're not non-virtuous. Okay? It is our craving for them that creates the problems. Okay? Because that craving is based on exaggerating their good qualities and then wanting them and clinging to them and grasping to them and, bullying other people to get what we want or lying to get what we want. Okay. So it's the craving that leads to all the problems and that leads to the creation of non-virtuous karma. So aspiring for liberation doesn't mean we look at the people in our lives and, good health and a clean house and things like that and say, oh, I'm beyond that. I've renounced that. No, these things are fine. They are what they are. Yeah. But we try not to get attached to them. We try not to crave them because attachment and craving create problems. Okay, so the purpose of seeing the things of samsara as unsatisfactory is to eliminate our craving for them, to eliminate our clinging to them, because those emotions keep us bound in samsara. The more we crave and cling to the things of samsara, the more we will continue to take rebirth in the conditions that we have just been learning about and seeing as dukkha, as totally unsatisfactory. So to live in society, money and possessions are necessary. Yeah, being a spiritual practitioner doesn't mean we throw everything away. We can use them without attachment and share them with others in order to create merit. We human beings are social creatures, and our lives depend on the kindness of others. So it's fine to appreciate the people in our lives and be compassionate toward them, but without being attached and clinging to them. Okay. So this is a new way of relating to other people. And it takes a while for us to really understand what it means, because we are so habituated to, when we have compassion for somebody, to get attached to them. Or to put it in another way, our compassion arises much stronger for people we're attached to than for strangers or for people we don't like. Okay, so what we're trying to do in our practice is get rid of all this favoritism, the attachment, the aversion, the I want, the push away, and instead, have an equal attitude towards all people and have an equal attitude towards different situations, in the sense that we don't get giddy with excitement when something nice happens, and we don't get deplorably depressed when something we don't like happens. We may still have preferences, but we aren't attached to our preferences. We don't insist that things are always the way we want them. Okay, so there's flexibility in our mind. We can adapt to different situations. Yeah, if the food is the kind of food we like, great. If it's not the kind of food we like, that's also okay. Yeah, you eat it, it nourishes you. Tomorrow, you don't even remember what you ate today. Okay? And that's certainly much better than getting all bummed out and complaining. Okay. So relinquishing attachment to our bodies doesn't mean we ignore our health and neglect to go to the doctor or the dentist. Okay, repeat. This one's important because sometimes people get a little bit weird about this. So relinquishing attachment to our bodies, doesn't mean like I feel sick, but well, I'm not attached, so I won't go to the doctor. Or you have a horrendous toothache and you say, well, I'm not attached. There's no reason to go to the dentist. That's not wisdom. That's stupidity. Because we need to have a body that is relatively healthy, because it facilitates our practice. Yeah. So we try and stay healthy. Yeah. We exercise, we eat properly. Yeah. But we don't cling to good health. We don't, denigrate our body in any way. Okay. Well, we take care of it because we need it, but we don't have to be attached to it. Yeah. And when sometimes we get ill and the doctor can't fix it, then we learn to live with it. Okay. So, we learn to adapt to situations instead of having so much craving and clinging and wanting things to be a certain way. Okay, our bodies are the physical support of our precious human lives that we use to practice the Dharma. So we must care for the body and keep it healthy. Caring for our bodies in a practical way is very different from indulging in sense pleasures with attachment. Okay, so I read somewhere that Melania Trump, now that she's no longer in the White House, at Mar-a-Lago, they have a spa, and she goes to the spa every day, spends most of the morning in the spa. Okay, that, I can't read her mind, but outwardly, that looks like there's some attachment going on. Okay, so that attachment is going to bring a lot of pain. because someday when, the spa's not working or whatever, unhappy. And also because the body gets old. And, you can go to the spa all you want. It doesn't make the body younger. Okay. So we can take care of our bodies in a practical way, but that's very different than saying, I have to go to a spa and I have to have, 20 different kinds of vitamins to take every day and, on and on and on. Okay. So with all of this talk about dukkha, we may mistakenly believe that Dharma practitioners must relinquish all of the usual activities that bring them happiness and instead practice extreme asceticism and self-denial. So you remember in the Buddha's biography, before he attained awakening, he went with 5 friends and he practiced, he did ascetic practice for 6 years. And they say he ate, they ate 1 grain of rice a day. So he got so thin that when he touched his belly button, he could feel his spine. Okay. And then the Buddha said, I'm torturing my body and, pretending like attachment to this body is bad. So I'm depriving the body of everything. But you know what? This is not eliminating the afflictions in my mind. And so he decided to eat again and gain his health back so that he could go meditate. And it's at that point then he crossed the river and he went under the Bodhi tree and meditated and attained supreme awakening. Yeah. And so he knew from his own experience that extreme self-denial is not the path to awakening, just as extreme self-indulgence is not the path to awakening. So we may develop this idea that, if we're really going to be holy beings, then, we will sleep on the concrete floor. We will eat 1 bean a day. We will, we give ourselves this kind of thing. And that's not it. Okay. Lama Yeshe, whenever he saw any of his students at Kopan try and do some kind of ascetic trip, he would scold them. Yeah. And I remember very clearly one disciple who, because we were living in this building that was a very old building. It was made of brick. So the floor also was made of brick. And all we had was, some straw mats that we slept on. And sometimes some people were rich and they could get a foam mat that was like this thick. So there was this one man, and he was just sleeping on the cold brick. And Lama would sometimes go around and he would look in our bedrooms and check what was going on. And when he saw just, that this guy was sleeping on the brick, he said, what do you think you're doing? Do you think, you're on some ascetic trip to try and look holy? Go get yourself a mattress. Okay. And so, he wouldn't stand for that when anybody did that kind of trip. On the other hand, when people were self-indulgent, he called us out on that too. Okay. So we may fear that there is no happiness to be experienced until we reach nirvana. Because samsara is just suffering. I'll never be happy until I get to nirvana. But this is not the right way to think, okay? In fact, it's important to have a happy mind while practicing the Dharma. So in samsara, although we will not have final happiness that is indestructible, that won't turn into suffering, still it's important to be able to keep a happy mind. Because if our mind is always unhappy and we're always grouchy and discontent and complaining and critical of other people, then it's very difficult to create virtue because we're spending most of our time creating non-virtue. We're having that kind of angry, discontent mind. Okay. I remember when I was living at Nalanda, and Geshe Jampa Tekchok was our teacher there. And he would say to people, they would come to him with their problems. And he would say, have a happy mind. And we would all go, well, that's why I'm coming to you, because I don't have a happy mind. Tell me how to have a happy mind. And in his teachings, that's what he was teaching us. He was teaching us how to have a happy mind. If we practiced those teachings, we would have had at least some level of contentment. Yeah. But we thought a happy mind came from, I don't know, outer space or some other kind of something, that he needed to give us some other teaching to teach us how to be happy, when that's what he was doing from the get-go. Okay, so as we go deeper into practice, we realize that there are many types and levels of happiness and pleasure. Having food, shelter, clothing, medicine, and friends bring us some well-being, enough that we can practice the Dharma without being in dire suffering, which would make practicing difficult if we, had no food, clothing, shelter, or medicine. Okay. So we have those things. They may not be the perfect things we want, but they keep us alive, and that is certainly good enough. As we practice more, we discover the internal peace arising from living ethically and the pleasant, relaxed feelings that come from improving our concentration. Okay, so if we live ethically, automatically that eliminates so much confusion from our mind and so much pain from our mind. Okay? When we live ethically, then we don't criticize ourselves so much. Yeah, because we did what was suitable and proper and kind for the situation. When we don't act ethically and we're trying to get the best thing for ourselves, or we're greedy, or we're disparaging, then we don't feel good inside. Okay? And at the end of the day, we have to live with ourselves. And if we don't feel good about our own actions, even other people tell us we're wonderful, that doesn't make our mind happy. Whereas if we live according to our own ethics, our own standards, our own values, then we're peaceful inside. We feel good about ourselves. Okay? So ethical conduct really is a big way to start feeling better about ourselves and to start having a happy life. Okay? When we develop concentration in our meditation, also the mind becomes calmer. So that creates a sense of happiness in this life as well. As we lessen our attachment and open our hearts to others, the joy derived from connecting with others on a heart level and acting with kindness towards them brings us a sense of fulfillment that is greatly superior to any sense pleasure that money and possessions can afford. Yeah, when you really open your heart to another living being, yeah, doesn't that bring a feeling in your own heart that is above and beyond what any kind of possessions or object could bring you? You know, I think that, His Holiness says that we're social beings. And I think we derive a lot of meaning in our lives from connecting with others. And, when we're able to do even a small thing that benefits somebody else, we feel good. His Holiness, I remember one time at a public talk, he was talking about compassion. And he said that we usually think when somebody's compassionate, that the person who receives the compassion is the fortunate one who's happy. And the person who gives compassion is self-sacrificing and maybe a little bit miserable. Okay? But the person who's on the receiving end of compassion is happy. And the Dalai Lama said, no, that's not the way it is. He said, when I'm compassionate, I don't know if the other person will accept my compassion, if they will feel better or not. I have no control over their response. But when I act out of compassion, I feel happy. When I'm able to give something to someone or lighten somebody's load, even a little bit, I have a sense of fulfillment in my heart. So he said, when I'm compassionate, I'm the person who benefits the most, not the person who's the object of my compassion. And if you think about this and watch your own experience, it's really true. Although most people in the world have intimate, emotional, and sexual relationships, some people choose not to have them. This is a valid lifestyle choice, whether people are Buddhist or not, whether they are monastics or lay practitioners. They are not avoiding intimacy. They prefer to use their life energy doing other things that are more important to them. In short, giving up our addiction to pleasure derived from external objects and people opens the door to experience other types of happiness. So many types of happiness in the world. Some people wonder if it's possible to become attached to Dharma and to crave liberation. Okay. The answer is no. Okay. Attachment is based on projecting or exaggerating qualities and then clinging to an object. In general, it is not possible to exaggerate the excellent qualities of the three jewels of the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, or to exaggerate the excellent qualities of liberation or full awakening. Furthermore, appreciation of the Dharma's excellent qualities and the aspiration to attain liberation are very different from being attached to them with obsessive longing or possessiveness. So don't confuse virtuous aspiration with clinging attachment. They're very different. Okay? And don't confuse making a wise choice with being attached to something. Yeah, again, they're quite different. But one of the things that people often get into the misunderstanding that people have is any kind of attraction towards anything means attachment, and that's bad. And that's not what the Buddha is saying. Okay? Attachment exaggerates the good qualities. Wisdom, aspiration, virtuous aspiration doesn't exaggerate good qualities. It knows the good qualities and directs our mind in the way towards what our mind should be directed towards. If someone perchance builds an ego identity, thinking, I am a Buddhist and my religion is best, that person has not understood Buddhism very well. His attitude is not one of attachment to Buddhism. Rather, his mind is afflicted with self-grasping and arrogance. Okay? So as Buddhists, we respect all religions, and we see that one religion or one philosophy is not the best for everybody. Why? Because people have different mentalities, different interests, different ways of thinking. Okay? What did they say? Different strokes for different folks. Okay? So we accept that people have differences. And as long as whatever they're practicing helps them to be more ethical and to be kinder, then we rejoice and we encourage them. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 2. Before going on, how about if we stop here and we have some Q&A? Okay, you may have some questions and comments building up. And so I have one question here from yesterday. Okay, so sometimes obstacles come all at once and they interfere with our Dharma practice. So how do we minimize them and reduce the obstacles getting in the way of our practicing the Dharma? Okay. There's a genre of teachings called mind training teachings. And one important point in the mind training teachings is how to take adversity into the path. Because as beings who live in samsara, we are always going to face adversity. We're never going to have a perfect situation. Why? Because the nature of samsara is dukkha, unsatisfactory. So if we think we have to wait for the perfect external situation, and we have to be in the perfect health, and all of our relationships have to be perfect before we practice the Dharma, then we will never practice the Dharma because we will never have perfect situations. So in practicing mind training, our obstacles are our practice. Our obstacles are what make us grow strong in the Dharma. Okay? So if we learn how to practice properly, if we learn the thought training techniques, and if we remember them, and if we put them into practice again and again and again, then our own mind transforms obstacles, and they actually become things that can benefit us on the practice. Because very often when we face a hindrance, we are called upon to grow. We are called upon to change. Okay? And so this hindrance, this obstacle, is the situation that is pushing us to really practice the Dharma and change our mind, instead of just going back to our usual ways of, distracting ourselves when we have difficulties. Okay? So I'll give you a few examples. I was once asked to, there was a wellness group at a hospital, someplace where I was teaching. And they asked me to come and talk to the people in the wellness group. And most of the people there had cancer, or were recuperating from cancer, or receiving treatment for cancer. And one woman said to me, she said, I have learned to appreciate that I got cancer, because it has made me change in a way that I never would have changed before. And I really appreciate my life so much more now. And I appreciate the people in my life so much more now. And I never would have had this new attitude of appreciation if I had not gotten cancer. That person, that woman, was practicing thought training. Okay? She took an obstacle and used it so that she developed some really good qualities out of it. And so that her life, became more meaningful than it was before. Yeah. So when we face obstacles, we usually go, oh no, how do I get rid of this? But when we are well habituated with the mind training practice, then when obstacles come, we say good, and we start to think, okay, what is this obstacle challenging me to develop? Because I have inner resources that I can develop to counteract this obstacle. Yeah, every obstacle doesn't need to destroy me. And so we go back and we really think about the teachings we've heard, and we start applying those teachings to our lives. And then the obstacle becomes less painful, and we really begin to grow in a way that we otherwise would not have grown. Personally speaking, one experience I had comes very strongly in my mind in this regard, where somebody betrayed my trust. Was somebody I was quite close to. They completely betrayed my trust. And I was like, and they did it not kind of gradually, but like, boom. And so I was like, what is going on here? I thought this person was a good friend, and now look what they're saying and look what they're doing. And, I was really, I was really kind of crushed and confused by it. And as it happened, some months after that incident, I was able to go into retreat. And in my retreat, I really tried to practice the mind training teachings and to really look at, what happened in that relationship with that person. And I saw that I had very unrealistic expectations. Yeah. I thought that person was different than they were. So I really spent some time thinking, okay, what went wrong? And like I said, I realized I had very unrealistic expectations of that person. Yeah. I thought this and this and this and this, and I never looked at what was actually happening with them. And I never asked them if they agreed to my expectations of them. And so, as I really understood this much better, I began to see that in many situations, I had unrealistic expectations of people. And so it really made me stop and slow down and realize I have to let people be who they are and let them, do what they need to be, do what they need to do, instead of my always, expecting them and to be this and that and trying to push them into being what I wanted them to be. And so I really came to appreciate what happened with that person. It was incredibly painful, but it really made me grow. And what's interesting, as a colophon to that situation, is a year or two afterwards, that person apologized to me. But by that time, I didn't need an apology. Yeah, because my mind had really changed. So he apologized to me, and I turned around and apologized to him for having unrealistic expectations. Yeah. So it's possible to use our obstacles, in terms of our practice. So very often, some ways to do that. Let's say you're sick, you don't feel well. Do the taking and giving meditation, the Tonglen meditation, where you imagine taking on the pain and suffering of others and giving them your happiness and your well-being. Think of doing purification. Yeah, because why do we have this obstacle? Because of some negative karma we created. Yeah, so do purification. When we purify, we can't stop karma that has already ripened. Yeah, so the karma that ripened is the obstacle. You're not purifying because it already matured. But whatever karma you have in the future to experience something similar, that karma you are purifying. Okay. Another thing that I find works very, very well is to think, why do I have this obstacle? Because of some negative karma that I myself created. Yeah, because suffering is the result of destructive actions. So sometime either in this life or in a previous life, I created some non-virtuous action. It is now ripening in terms of, this obstacle that I face. And so I'm going to learn from it. And there's a very good text called The Wheel of Sharp Weapons and a commentary on it called Good Karma that explain all sorts of karmic relationships. Like when you do this, this is the kind of result that you're going to experience. Or when this happens to you, it's because you created this kind of cause by doing this action. Okay. So it's a very informative text to get us thinking when we have obstacles about the kind of action we did in the past that created the karma that's ripening as this obstacle. And then we can think, okay, if I don't like this obstacle, then I have to be very careful in the future not to do this same destructive action. Yeah, because if I continue to create, the same non-virtue, I'm going to continue to get this same miserable result. And so in that way, we really learn from our experiences. And, when you think like that, then it really transforms how you interact with what happens in your life. Okay, one of my Dharma friends, when she was in retreat in Nepal, she got a very big boil on her cheek. And boils are very painful. When she was walking around the monastery one day on a break in her meditation, she bumped into our teacher, and he said, "Oh, how are you?" And she said, "This is miserable, my boil hurts so much." And he said, "Good, fantastic." And she was like, "Huh?" And then, he said, "You're purifying all that karma. And so once you purify that karma, it's no longer there obscuring your mind. It's not it can't ripen and create another obstacle because you're experiencing the result of it now and finishing that." Okay. So it really made her kind of look at the situation in a very different way. So the previous chapter was about the first truth, true dukkha. The current chapter, chapter 3, is called the true origins of dukkha. So this is what causes all of our unsatisfactory experiences. So we live amidst true dukkha day in and day out. It is our close companion, never letting us be peaceful in our own hearts or with others. Since we do not like dukkha and want to be free from it, we must seek out its causes, examine if those causes can be eliminated, and if so, learn what the path is to eliminate them. So the Buddha identified afflictions and karma as the true origins of dukkha. So karma means actions, volitional actions, and the karma arises from afflictions. And the chief affliction is ignorance. Okay, there's many kinds of ignorance. This is a special kind of ignorance, okay? And it's the ignorance that misapprehends how things actually exist. So whereas things arise dependent on causes and conditions and parts and so on, we think that everything has its own independent inherent essence. As a result of seeing ourselves in that way, we think that there's a real solid me. And then we make a big deal out of me. And I have to have happiness. And so we get attached to things. And anything that interferes with our happiness, I don't like. So we get angry and we want to destroy it or run away from it. Okay. But all these kinds of afflictions are rooted in the ignorance that apprehends things as existing in the opposite way than they really exist. Okay. So the Buddha identified afflictions and karma as the true origins of dukkha. Karma arises from afflictions, the chief of which is ignorance. In this chapter, we will examine the defilements that are the origins of dukkha. These mental factors keep us bound in cyclic existence and prevent our attainment of nirvana and awakening. So these are the real troublemakers. Yeah. We think other people are the source of our happiness. Other people and we think that other people are also the source of our unhappiness. Actually, it's our mental state that is the source of our unhappiness. Or when we transform it, it's our mental state that's the source of our happiness. Okay. So it is these mental factors keep us bound in cyclic existence and prevent our attainment of nirvana and awakening. Buddhist psychology is profound and reveals parts of our minds that we may have been oblivious to. Virtuous and variable mental factors were described in chapter 3 of the previous volume. That was called The Foundation of Buddhist Practice. So the following afflictive mental factors are explained in the context of factors that produce dukkha and interfere with attaining liberation and full awakening. So it's important to approach the topic of afflictions with the correct attitude. Avoid using the various lists of defilements to criticize yourself, thinking, oh, I have so much anger. I am so jealous. What a bad person I am. Because we're going to go through lists of different afflictive mental states, and we will see that we have them, all of them. But that doesn't mean we're bad people. So don't get into, oh, I'm so bad. Oh, look, I'm like this and this. Okay. Because what we're doing is we're identifying what the causes of our dukkha is so that we can overcome those causes and attain a state of happiness. Okay? We're not studying these so that we can increase our self-hatred and our low self-esteem. The Buddha does not need to teach us that. Okay? We do that all by ourselves with our confused mind. So the Buddha is teaching us these things so that we can identify them and then work to overcome them. Okay. Remember that gaining knowledge about mental defilements gives us the power to free ourselves from them and arrive at a state of true peace. Basically, if we want to clean our room, we have to see the dirt. You can't clean your room if you can't see the dirt. So in the same way, if we want to clean our mind and purify our mind, we have to be able to identify the dirt in it, the afflictive mental states. Yeah. Otherwise, if you try and clean your room, but you don't know where the dirt is, you can work for a long time, but you're not going to have a clean room. Okay. So we have the potential to free ourselves from these defilements. So chapters 12 to 14 in this particular volume will discuss the possibility to attain liberation and our Buddha nature that makes that possible. But right now, we have to look at what needs to be eradicated. Describing afflictions is similar to identifying the thieves in our house. Okay, especially when thieves have been masquerading as our friends while all the time stealing our happiness. Okay, so there's somebody in your house that looks so nice. They stick up for you. They praise you. They tell you how wonderful you are. And then you find out that they've basically been siphoning off your money and stealing your stuff and taking advantage of you. Okay. So the afflictions are like that because sometimes when an affliction is very strong in our mind, we feel powerful or we feel happy. And we think that the affliction is what is giving us power and happiness. And it's not. Okay. It's actually the thief that's destroying our happiness. Okay. When we know their characteristics of these thieves, of the defilements, we can catch them, evict them, and lock the door behind them so they can never return. But unlike living thieves that can regroup later, once evicted, afflictions vanish completely. Okay? So once we have the wisdom that understands how things actually exist and use that wisdom to overcome our ignorance, then all of the defilements that depend on ignorance to exist, they, fade away. It's like when you cut the root of a tree, all the branches die. So it's the same kind of thing. Yeah. So once we've eradicated the defilements from our mind, they can't go regroup elsewhere and then come back and afflict us. Yeah. If we haven't eliminated them completely because we haven't realized the nature of reality, then we may subdue them for a while, but they'll come back again. But at least we've learned to subdue them for a while. And slowly we increase that and get better and better at doing that. So like all other phenomena, mental defilements are empty of inherent existence. They are transient, like bubbles that quickly burst. They have no essence, like the trunk of a plantain tree. Rather than think of anger or any other affliction as a solid emotion that is always lurking under the surface of your mind, ready to explode, spewing its vitriol, recognize that all these afflictions, including anger, exist by being merely designated in dependence on some moments of mind that share some common characteristics. We designate anger. That's all anger is. So this is important because in the West, when we talk about psychology, we often talk about suppressed emotions as if, here's the surface of our mind, we're living our life, but underneath, there's repressed anger, repressed resentment, repressed belligerence because of what happened in our childhood. And all these things are lurking beneath the surface. And at any time, they're going to explode. And our repressed anger is going to go blah and dump its lava all over the whole world. Okay? So we have sometimes the image of our afflictions as something solid like that, that are unpredictable and poof, going to explode. But it's not like that. When we think of something like anger, okay, can we identify one thing that is anger? Okay. Can you identify one moment in your whole lifetime, only one moment, that is real anger? There's no real anger. There's a lot of moments of mind that have come in our lifetime that share the common characteristic of being based on exaggerating the negative quality of someone or something. So there's these different mental states that have a common characteristic. Yeah. And that characteristic is they've made a mountain out of a molehill, but think there's a real mountain there. And thus they want to destroy the mountain or they want to run away from it. Okay. So on top of all those, or not on top of, independence on all those mental states that share that common characteristic, we give the name anger. That's all anger is. Okay? There's no real inherently existent anger there. It's just something, it's a term that we have designated on several mental states in our lifetime that have that common characteristic. When we see anger in that way, does it give you a whole different feeling about your anger? For me, it gives me a feeling like, oh, it's something, it's kind of light. Whereas when I think, oh, I am angry and there is repressed anger under the surface, then I feel like, if that's what I think anger is, then, something gets quite tense. But when I think anger, it's basically something that exists by giving a name to certain mental states that have a common characteristic. Okay? So try to see your anger as something like that, okay? In dependence on some moments of mind that share some common characteristics, we designate anger. That's all anger is. It's not a monster that is an inherent part of us. It is not who we are. We need to view our afflictions from two perspectives. On the one hand, they are the source of our misery. On the other hand, they lack essence and can be completely eradicated from our mind stream. They are not an inherent part of us. They are not hardwired into some part of our brain. There are many ways of classifying mental defilements. And so in this chapter, we will begin with the 6 root afflictions, the most prominent group in the Sanskrit tradition. So this is a good place for us to stop because the next section is quite long. Yeah. So this is just introducing the notion of afflictions. But I think, this last point that we hit, seeing your afflictions as something that has been merely designated on a group of similar moments of consciousness, think about that. Don't think of your anger as like, oh, I've always been angry and, I had this horrible childhood and it's still so painful that I've got to be angry and that anger is in my heart and there's no way I can get rid of it. If you say that to yourself, if you describe your pain and your anger like that to yourself, you're going to be really miserable. And it's also an unrealistic view of what pain and anger are. Okay? So try and see it as something different. And when you do, then you see that there's many alternatives, many options in your life. One last little bit to think about nirvana is just, this will give you a feeling for what nirvana is. It's not the real nirvana, but it gives you a feeling. For a minute, imagine what it would be like not to get angry, that there was no seed of anger in your mind, so that no matter what people said to you, you didn't get irritated and upset. No matter what people did to you or how they treated you, you would not get enraged. What would it be like just not to have anger? Yeah, just try imagining that. It feels really nice, doesn't it? Yeah, it's like, wow, wouldn't that be a release? Not to have anger. Okay, so then what is nirvana? It's not only anger being forever removed from our mind like that, but also craving, jealousy, belligerence, spite, all these kinds of afflictive mental states. They've just been cut off from the root. And imagine how peaceful you would feel if that were the case. That gives us some little taste of what nirvana might be like. So with that, let's dedicate the merit